Thanks for checking out this movie review video. This is for the 2022 film Glorious. It's a Shudder exclusive and it's coming to Shudder on Thursday, August 18th. So for that reason, this is a no spoiler review. You can safely watch this not having seen the film and just get a little bit of an idea of what you're getting into with the film. I will say off the bat, I do recommend this one. I do think it will find its audience, especially on Shudder. And I think there are going to be a lot of people who end up loving it. I didn't love it. I did like it. And you'll see that in my rating at the very end. But yeah, there's a lot of interesting stuff going on here. You do need to know, like a lot of the Shudder exclusives and originals, it's low budget. You can definitely tell it's a low budget film. But I think they kind of took that challenge and did what they could with it and put out a nice product. So yeah, I just feel like a lot of the times it helps to go into a film kind of recognizing, oh, this is low budget, or this is no budget, or this is high budget, because it then kind of sets expectations of like what is really feasible versus not feasible for the filmmakers. And speaking of the filmmaker, directed by Rebekah McKendry, who also directed All the Creatures Were Stirring, which I have seen, and I think it's still on Shudder actually from years ago that it was put on there. It's like Christmas themed anthology film. I thought that was pretty fun, very low budget. Also did Psycho Granny. And if the name Rebekah McKendry sounds familiar, she's also been featured a bunch in some documentaries, or I think she was in Eli Roth's History of Horror. Like she's a very intellectual horror person who's known within the horror community. So I was excited to see that this was a film by her. I've enjoyed what she's had to say from a academic horror standpoint, so I was excited to support something she was doing. Which, by the way, she did a good job with directing. I would definitely be interested in seeing more of her directorial stuff because the film looks good. You know, cinematography-wise, director-wise, looking good. Written by Joshua Hull, who also wrote Beverly Lane, The Impersonators, Bethlehem, and Chopping Block. David Ian McKendry, who also wrote All the Creatures Were Stirring and Psycho Granny. They are married, I do believe. Not Josh Hull and David Ian McKendry. David Ian McKendry and Rebekah McKendry. And by the way, real quick, when I was looking this up, I was like, David Ian McKendry, where does that name sound familiar from? I used to listen to, and maybe I need to go back to it, a Dungeons and Dragons horror-based podcast called Fear Initiative, and David Ian McKendry was, and I think still is, involved with that podcast. So if anyone's looking for a horror-related Dungeons and Dragons podcast, I know it's like very specific. I recommend it. I thought it was a lot of fun. I don't know why I stopped listening to it, but like I said, I think maybe I need to go back. And then the other writer was Todd Rigney, who also wrote Found and Headless. Once again, this is coming to Shudder on Thursday, August 18th. Shudder exclusive. Synopsis, I don't want to give too much away. I never like to do that with these because there's no spoilers, but it's about one main character in particular. You do get a few other characters who show up in this, but it's about one main character who is obviously, they establish very early on, is kind of not doing well life-wise, dealing with some tough stuff, kind of living out of his car, it looks like, drinking a lot, and he stops at a rest stop, kind of ends up spending the night, I feel, unintentionally, and then goes to the bathroom in the morning to kind of get a little bit cleaned up, and gets locked in there with something. That's where I'm going to leave it. Obviously, it's a horror film, so horror-type stuff happens. There is a suspense to it. There's a little bit of a thriller aspect. There is a mystery to try and figure out what's really going on, which is answered within the film, thankfully. So there you go. They do an effective job of establishing character situation very early, which helps you sympathize with the main character. Now, obviously, not everything about the main character is revealed immediately. You know, you want to kind of get little bits and pieces of extra stuff as the film goes on, and that does obviously happen within the film. But the establishment of the character, what the character is going through, their kind of mental state, is quickly done, it's effectively done, so it really helps you as a viewer get into their mind. So sets the stage. The film gets quirky pretty fast, but in a fun and good way. It's not like one of those weird quirky things where like, this director's just making the film for themselves. No, it's like a fun, weird, quirky type thing that goes on. And on that note, there are some comedic moments that get worked into the film that I don't think any of them didn't land for me personally. All the comedic stuff actually landed for me. One in particular that's about 50 minutes into it, I found very funny. I didn't laugh out loud because I was watching it by myself, and for some reason I don't laugh typically when I'm by myself, unless it's like insanely funny, but I did enjoy it, had a little bit of a chuckle to myself internally, and I appreciate that moment quite a bit. Obviously, I'm laughing a little now thinking about it. Ryan Quanten and J.K. Simmons do a really good job in this. They are kind of like the main characters to it. A lot of people know J.K. Simmons. A lot of people might not remember Ryan Quanten. He was his biggest role was in True Blood as I don't even remember the character. I only watched the first 2 seasons of True Blood because I wasn't into it. The first season I thought was okay on and off. The second season I thought was terrible, especially the ending was like horrible. And then I just stopped. But a lot of people love him from True Blood. He is a very good actor, and he does a very good job here, just like J.K. Simmons, who's a very recognized, awesome actor. About 15 to 20 minutes in, it feels like the whole film is actually going to end up taking place in one location, and it does. So this is one of the big challenges with doing a film like this, and a lot of the times you get these types of films because they are low budget, because it's a lot easier just to shoot on one location. It's more cost effective and everything. So, and you also have a lot more control if you just have one location for what you need to get on film. So it does become challenging, though, because it becomes hard to keep the film engaging and interesting if you're just in one enclosed space, especially something as small as a rest stop bathroom. So, yeah, but I think they do a pretty solid job. They do move the story relatively well. There are a few moments where it feels like it does start to stagnate a little bit and the pacing does suffer slightly, but not too bad. One of the problems is one of the characters tends to kind of repeat the same type of stuff over and over again. Like he's just kind of saying the same thing, saying it differently, but saying the exact same thing. And it kind of feels like some of that should have been cut out because that's what kind of messes up a bit of the pacing. That's what makes the story feel like it stagnates a little bit from time to time. But like I said, it's not too bad. It's just a little bit of that. And I think for that reason, the film could have been cut somewhere between 5 and 10 minutes. But to that note, the film is only a runtime of like an hour and 18 minutes with credits. So kudos to the filmmakers for not trying to stretch it and be like, oh, it's a feature-length film. It has to be an hour and a half, and then just putting extra crap in there that we don't need. Too many films do that. So it's great to see that this film didn't do that. They took what time they felt they needed, which for the most part I think was accurate. And I always appreciate that when filmmakers are not wasting my time. So thank you for not wasting my time. I dig the color usage in this film, and they are colors that kind of indicate something about the story to people. That's as much as I can say, but people who have seen other films kind of like this will kind of immediately pick up on, okay, these colors kind of remind me of things. A few films kind of within the past bunch of years that use the same colors for a certain reason. I'm going to leave that there. The CGI is actually pretty solid, especially for a lower budget film. I was quite impressed because a lot of times with lower budget films like this, the CGI can look really bad. I mean, it's not the most amazing CGI I've seen, but I was expecting a lot worse. So I was like, oh, that's actually not bad at all. Pretty solid. Also, practical effects. There aren't a ton of practical effects in this, but it ramps up more at the end, which makes a whole lot of sense because with lower budget horror films, that's typically what they want to do because they want to have more of a grandiose finish to it, especially as far as like gore and practical effects go. So when they do have practical effects in this, they look good. One bit in particular at the end, I was quite impressed by that I did not see coming. And I was just kind of like, oh, okay, that's all right. Nice. Get it. There are some, I already said that. There is a pretty good twist at the end of the film. I did not see the twist coming to it. So I always like when I didn't see something coming, especially with a big twist at the end of the film, it does change the context of some stuff going on within it, and it does change the way you feel about certain things within the film. So kudos for putting in a good twist at the end. I like that. It does give you a nice kind of feeling of good payoff. Like I said, there's good directing to it, and this film actually deals a lot in loss, which is something that a lot of horror films do deal with, and the pain of grieving. It gets more complicated by the end of the film. I'm trying to choose my words very carefully because I don't want to give things away, but it feels more complicated towards the end of the film. And I will say, in the end of the film, it made me feel like it mirrors a few other films that have come out kind of recently. And I don't want to say which ones because that would lead people too much as to A, what the twist is, and B, what the overall story is. And those are from two separate films that I can point to directly. But I'm not going to do it. But if people want to talk about that in the comments, we can certainly do that. So out of 5 stars with half stars in play, I'm going to give this a quite solid 3-star rating. It's between 3 and 3.5, but I just can't bump it up to the half, honestly, just because of that little bit of like stagnation that comes in and how it gets a little bit repetitious with the story. But on a different day, maybe I'd go 3.5. Like, just know it's very hard for me to pick between 3 and 3.5. So just, it's in there, but officially 3. But like I said, I know this is going to find its fan base. I know there are going to be people out there who watch this and they come back and comment on this and are like, I loved it. I thought it was amazing. And that's excellent. I always want films to find their fan base. And I don't really think this one will have a hard time doing that. There are films I've reviewed that I'm like, man, it's going to have a hard time finding its fan base. But this one, I don't think so. It's fun. It's a good time. There's a lot of good stuff going on here. So anyway, that's my review for it. Go ahead and put some comments down there. We can talk about it. We can do spoilers in the comments, so go ahead and do that. Hit YouTube. I'm getting tired. I'm sorry. It's one of those days. Hit subscribe to my YouTube channel if you can for me. And you can. It is quick, painless, costs you nothing. And it really does help me out in keeping me motivated. It really, and also I just want to grow my channel. You know, everyone wants to do that. Also hit the notification bell button because then you'll know when I'm putting up my new videos, which I'm doing at least 4 a week at this point. I think the week I'm putting this out, it's going to be 5 because I'm dropping 2 Shudder-related reviews on the same day, which is this one and The Innocents. So just saying, I'm putting in work. Pay me back with a subscribe and all that jazz. But anyway, regardless, I thank you for taking your time to watch this video. And until next time, keep it brutal.